Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of Fit RX. I'm your host, Dr. Greg Dennis, and today I have an herbalist on the show. I feel like I have a very open mind about things, as if you follow me, you probably know that. And, um, kind of herbal medicine, if you will, is something I don't know a whole lot about. I have used some herbs for various things, whether to, you know, fight off an infection or different things, which I'm sure we'll talk about. But I certainly am no expert on herbs and herbal medicine. And I just thought it would be a good topic to talk about. And I'm actually surprised that I haven't talked more about it and had somebody on the show before now. But my guest is Jane Barlow, and she is a master herbalist who was kind of born into this world. I'll let her talk about that. But they have a website, Barlow Herbal, barlowherbal.com, and they sell just all kind of different herbs, which again, I'm sure we'll talk about some. They have education on there about herbs. She has some blogs on there, so all kind of information. So excited to learn from her. So, Jane, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Dr. Dennis. It's very nice to be here. I think it is a little surprising that you haven't had other people talking about herbs, but I'm happy to be the first. Happy,
Mm,
happy.
yeah, well, very, very good.
Yeah.
Uh, as I mentioned briefly, you were kind of born into this. I always ask people, kind of how they got into what they're doing now. It sounds like you kind of grew up with that, but talk about that a little bit. Just, I guess, maybe a little bit more specific about what you do, and then, your family, and I guess with that, kind of what it was like growing up with. Um, I don't know what you call your family, I guess just herbalists or
Yeah.
whatever. So just kind of talk about your background a little bit.
Yeah. So I was born in 61, 1961. So I grew up in the 60s and 70s to my dad, who was a medicinal botanist. So his degree and his PhD was in what makes plants into medicine for humans. It always fascinated him from when he was really young. In fact, he was the only one in his family that didn't go into the family heating and plumbing and electrical business. So his brothers, even his two sisters, all went into that business. But my dad was just like a nature guy. He loved the Native Americans and the plants that came along with all their rich history. And so me and all my siblings, I'm second oldest of 14 kids. So it kind of gives you context to, the kind of family I grew up in was just this big family, a dad who was a botanist who loved herbs. And we just kind of grew up, not really off the grid, but we didn't go to the doctor very hardly ever, unless there was like a broken arm or some type of an emergency. But we just were these kind of little hippie kids. My mom always made homemade bread. We kind of dipped in and out of homeschooling. And so it was kind of interesting as we all got older. We most of us were like, oh, finally freedom. We can eat what we want. And we all dived into junk food and fast food and all the crappy stuff that we didn't get when we were growing up. But after soon after that, as each of us experienced it, we came back to our roots. But what's interesting is my dad passed away 27 years ago, and he was actually a year younger than I am right now. When he passed, he was 62. So it was kind of like he was very young. That's a whole other story we can get into if you want. But um, I was in the fitness industry for 20 years. I owned my own gym. I was a personal trainer. My first career in love was fitness. So after my dad passed, his business kind of died with him. And 4 years after he passed, there was just this call. It was like, someone needs to carry on my dad's work. And I never dreamed it would be me, but I've been going for 23 years now, and I would love nothing more than to sit down with my dad now and have a conversation, considering what I've learned, how much the world has changed, even, because the internet wasn't around when he was alive. So just that alone, and the connection we can get with people and the way we can share information and learn about things has changed exponentially. So yeah, that's just kind of a quick backstory on how I got started. I never dreamed it would be me doing this, but at this point, I feel like the plants kind of talk to me. They kind of like I get these interesting downloads of which plants I should study next and put into certain blends, and it's real. I'm having a lot of fun.
Hmm. Interesting.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah,
Uh, so talk about kind of what you do now. I feel like some people with herbs, they don't do the foundational stuff, meaning they eat what they want, they eat like
yeah,
crap, and then they
yeah.
think, oh, well, I'm gonna find some herb that's gonna make me healthy. Uh, it sounds like you kind of live just a more a holistic kind of general healthy life. Talk about, just kind of your lifestyle, maybe what you've learned over the years.
Yeah, you're absolutely right on that. In fact, I'll talk to someone who will present with this, it might even just be a close friend. Will say they have this problem and this health problem or this just maybe bothering symptom they're having. And I'm not a doctor and never profess to be, but I'll say, well, what are you eating? And what are you drinking? And how much sleep are you getting? And how much movement are you getting? Because you can't have good health without the foundation. And I have people that all the time want me to give them an herbal protocol when they're not willing to do the other stuff, because you
Mm,
can't cover up a disease or lifestyle issues with herbs. You can't even really cover those up with drugs. It's both. You have to have the foundation. So in a way, it's been really kind of fun for me to have the big foundation of not just my dad, but then 20 years in the fitness industry where I watched all the fads come, like the low fat and all the artificial sweeteners and all the carb loading with all the pastas. I used to run marathons with one of my sisters, and we would carb load, and we were eating way low fat, and I was a vegan for a long, long time. And I've kind of been watching the gamut of all the things that change, and there is a foundational piece of health that the herbs are absolutely a part of it, because that's part of our history as humans. If you look at the world, the majority of human beings still turn to plant medicine first. Only in the modern world for the last 150 years have we gotten off track in the Western world. So, all the things I mentioned,
mm,
you have to have movement
mm,
every single day. I don't care if it's just walking or whatever it is. You have to get good sleep. You have to disconnect from your technology. I think that's one of the things that is really harming our health, because it not only harms us physically because we're so sedentary usually when we consume information, but it's programming us, and it's taking us away from being present with our families, and it's yeah, so it's a holistic foundation that you can't overlook. So
mm.
if someone's not willing to put that piece into place, you can learn all you want about herbs, but you can't cover up poor health with an herbal protocol.
Yeah, yeah, well said.
Yeah,
So, especially in the medical community, and
yeah,
I would say I probably did this at some point in my career. I've definitely changed a lot as a practitioner.
yeah.
But in the medical community, when a patient or when somebody brings up that they're doing some herbs or they're doing that, there's probably some eye rolling, and you're like, okay, whatever. Um, what do you feel like is the biggest kind of misconception out there about herbs and herbal medicine, both just with the general public and also maybe in the medical community?
Well, I think the misconception actually stems around the fact that people just don't know. They just don't know enough about it. I think one of the things that surprised me the most after I restarted my dad's company was about 5 years in, my dad used to sell only to practitioners, because the line that he had, there was a real education curve, because he did have his PhD. He really geeked out on all of the plant constituents and the botanical name and the Latin name and all the things that, he was a genius,
Mhm.
really. And he basically uh, sold to doctors because of the learning curve. If you're dealing with Lyme disease or some type of really acute infection or whatever it may be. He did a lot of work with a cancer clinic in Mexico for years and years and years, and he studied with some really incredible pioneers in not just the field of plant medicine, but in other areas of medicine too. He was a real scientific guy. But when I restarted his company, I used his same list of practitioners, and most of them were natural doctors. So, naturopaths and chiropractors, and there were a few DOs and that. But then what happened, which was really interesting to me, is about 5 years after I restarted, and I was only doing it also just to practitioners, I started getting kind of one by one at a time. I would get a medical doctor would find me, and he would be referred by a colleague who was maybe a naturopath, or maybe that it was his chiropractor or whatever. And I would get these medical doctors who would see some stuff that I was doing, and they were interested and they wanted to treat themselves and their family using some of these things that they learned about. Because what I found is people in the modern medicine realm are really, really smart, curious people, and they want to have all of the tools in their arsenal to help their patients. And it's not all of them, but I realized there was a fairly good sized group of people. And then interestingly, and this is a little triggering for some people, is that I would have doctors that would go on, put a protocol, say, for their wife for something kind of gnarly that they got diagnosed with, but they didn't want to put their wife through their own treatments. They wanted to do something natural first. So I just had this interesting, I've been going 23 years now since I restarted, and it's been a really interesting journey, because I think the biggest misconception is that it might be dangerous. It might be dangerous to trust an herbal medicine or an herbal remedy over modern medicine. And I think it's just a lack of knowledge. It's because in a perfect world, this is what I see. A person that's a patient that has a health issue needs to go in and get help from experts and people who know what they're doing. You go in and everything is included. You might need surgery. You might need a prescription drug. That you also might need not only herbs, but you might need acupuncture. You might need Reiki, energy healing. Everything needs to be included in what's best for the person. So I think that I really believe we're moving more toward that. I feel really, and not just hopeful, but I see the wave of people saying, okay, I don't want to throw out the baby with the bathwater. You don't ever want to throw out all the beautiful things that modern medicine has gifted us with.
Mm-hmm.
But there's got to be a different way, because we've never been sicker than we are now
Mm-hmm.
as modern humans.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, no doubt. And I mean, that's what made me, my listeners know this, but that's what made me open my mind up to different things is, I used to practice very conventional medicine. I did that for many, many years. And I say now I was fortunate that I was able to take a step back and realize that this isn't working. I was
yeah,
doing everything that I was told to do and taught to do. And, the people just were sick and they just kept getting sicker and not better. And I
yeah,
thought, there's got to be some better ways. And in fact, there's a lot better ways. And so,
yeah.
for that reason, I'm open to things like herbs that I may not know a lot about, because there's other things that definitely work that I do have experience with that, I didn't, many, many years ago that I would have rolled my eyes at then. So I wish more doctors were just and practitioners were open, to things. Unfortunately, I feel like many of them just have the blinders on and don't want to hear anything else, which surprises me because, I want to say to a lot of them, just take a step back and look, and like, it's hard to admit, it'd be hard to admit that the standard of care works well. I mean, it doesn't really make people better. And I'm not anti-medicine, and there
Yeah,
are some aspects of medicine that do some good things, especially for acute care. But we do an
yeah.
absolute terrible job at, preventing diseases, and then also chronic. Dealing with chronic conditions, and so I just wish more people would be open-minded to whatever. Um,
Well, I think the ego gets in the way a little bit. I have one of my sisters went into the nursing field. She was a labor and delivery nurse she's still working. She's been there 30 years. And while she still has that whole piece of the way we were raised, that's a big part of her life. And she does a ton of natural things and herbal things. She has been completely um, I don't even know how to put it, but she's been really kind of hijacked into the medical realm, to the point where there are things that I watch, and because we're close to each other, um, I do think that part of it is there's an ego involved, and to admit that maybe you were taught something wrong that you is very difficult for the human for the human ego, from my perspective.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about herbs.
Yeah, let's
Um,
do it.
they're as you mentioned, I think, and practitioners are saying most people just don't know enough about them. There's they hear things, oh, such and such might help with a cold, and this, that, and the other.
Yeah,
And again, I'm certainly not an expert on them either. So there's a lot out there, all kinds of plant
yeah,
medicine and herbal
yeah.
medicine, and so you know. I guess give us the basics, herbal medicine 101. I mean, where does somebody start that's maybe interested in trying some things?
Yeah, and that is the perfect question, because I think that when people have an interest and they start really kind of dipping their toe in, it's extremely overwhelming because there is a lot. But the best way that I like to share with people to start is, and this is every single person can start, and that's start with your kitchen spices. And if you think about the things that you use, like say cayenne pepper, and I don't like hot spicy foods. So I actually take cayenne pepper every single day because of how good it is for me. But I take it in capsules, in capsule form, because I don't even, so if you don't like cayenne pepper, you can definitely supplement it. But cayenne is good for your heart. It's good for your vascular system. It's good for your digestion. It's amazing for your metabolism. I've had several family members over these decades who've actually healed an ulcer using cayenne pepper because it's so good for, you take a cayenne capsule, it dissolves in your stomach, and you would think it would be the opposite, where it would irritate an ulcer, but it actually will go in and heal an ulcer. But there's just so many beautiful things, like it's a vasodilator. So if you love spicy, then start spicing up your food with cayenne pepper. Things like basil, things like rosemary and garlic. This is a really easy place to start. Get it as fresh as you can, because if you get, a dried herb that you've had sitting in your spice cupboard for 10 years, it might flavor your food a little bit, but it's not going to have a lot of medicinal properties. So just start thinking differently about the spices that you put in the food that you're eating. Because look at some of these, you know, uh, like Indian cuisine or Lebanese food, or food that is, really well known for its spices, the curry with the turmeric, and, the curcumin, and all of these, which is in the turmeric. But these things that are really, really flavorful will give you a ton of health benefits, antioxidants and anti-inflammatory, and there's anti-cancer properties in simply the spices that you add to your food. So to me, that's the easiest place to start. It's not intimidating. You don't have to worry about, is this going to hurt me? That's to me the very best place to start.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Um, what what do most people when they reach out to you, are they do they have specific conditions like, hey, can you request an herb to help me, do this and that? Or what do you typically get?
Yeah, and partly we get found because we've been around for so long. So we've had a presence for so many years. In fact, this summer um, is 50 years when my
Wow.
dad started his company. So a lot of it has just been simple, word of mouth, and we're really well known for a couple things. Mainly, there's a Native American plant that only grows in the Pacific Northwest, and it's called lomatium. And it's a broad spectrum antimicrobial, and it goes after not just chronic virus, fungus, yeast, bacteria, but also acute. So, having used this since I was about 14, my dad made it into a tincture. So the transportation into your body is really quick. Um, I raised two boys and now my grandkids, but my boys are in their 40s. And and I'm not against antibiotics in a prescription form, but neither one of my boys have ever had a prescription antibiotic
Wow.
because of this plant. So And my use with it is very, very deep and extensive at this point, not just with my own kids and my grandkids now, but just all my family, all the people that I've come in contact with, and the deep research, not just from my dad, but also, there's a few things I've learned about it since my dad's passed on that I'd be like, oh my gosh, I would love to see what his take was on just this particular plant because he studied it for 30 years. So there's things like lomatium. Now, the interesting thing about this plant is that there's about 10% of the people that take it for the first time that will get a full body one-time detox rash. And it's intense and but it's classic. It comes on about 5 to 7 days after they start taking it. Not everybody gets it, most people don't, but it seems to be correlated to a little bit of an overloaded liver. So if we support and detox the liver, nourish and give it some, good herbal protection and love, we can prevent the rash in most people who maybe would have gotten it. So we've got this whole kind of protocol around it there, and there still is a big learning curve to this plant lomatium. But, COVID hit and I was like, meh. I mean, it didn't even faze me because I have access and knowledge to some of these hardcore antiviral plants like this.
Hmm.
So, and really interesting.
Okay. Um, are there, not necessarily for a specific health condition, but are there two or three specific herbs that you feel like almost everybody should be taking? I I've kind of experimented over the years because I always have a protein shake after I work out in the morning, and so I'll sometimes buy a packet of like maca root, and I've
Mhm.
had a couple of different ones over the years that I'll just throw into my protein shake. And I don't really taste them. I just throw it in there just to try different things. Um, if somebody like myself is just generally healthy, do you feel like there's a few out there that just have really good health benefits that like everybody should just be on?
Well, I'll bring up cayenne again here. Cayenne to me is simple.
Okay.
If I'm glad I don't have to pick just one or two or even 4 or 5 herbs. But cayenne is always in my top five,
Okay.
simply because of what it does for heart health, circulation, all the things we talked about. That would be something. In fact, I remember growing up, my dad said, okay, when you guys turn 35, cayenne pepper should be a part of your daily, either your diet or your supplement routine. And for years, I used to get like a pound of organic, freshly ground up cayenne pepper, and I would get some empty veggie caps, and I would get a bowl and put the cayenne in it, and I would sit and hand encapsulate cayenne pepper. I did that for probably 10 years, 10 or 15 years before I actually brought it out into a product because I was like, just, do this yourself, people. And a lot of people didn't want to do that. But cayenne pepper would absolutely be up there. I think turmeric, because of all its properties with inflammation and
Mhm.
pain and its anti-cancer preventative potential. And I do love things like maca because it's a really powerful adaptogen. And I am also really in love with some of the mushrooms,
Mhm.
like lion's mane, turkey tail. Those I think, lion's mane it stimulates nerve growth factor in your brain. This is something I've added to my routine about 5 years ago, just because, I'm in my 60s and my goal is to prevent dementia. So I think there's, heart and brain besides I do all the stuff, all the lifestyle stuff, but I believe that it's really important if you start understanding why some of these plants were put on the earth for us. But then this is where the wisdom comes in because I think that they figure there's like 13,000 species of mushrooms. I might be off on that. And then there's only like 13, 12 or 13 that are medicinal. There's some of the medicinal ones that are also culinary. Like lion's mane is not only a good medicinal mushroom, it's a culinary mushroom and it's really, really delicious. And in my grocery store here, you can actually buy it in the grocery store to cook with now, which is really cool. But I think, maca, back to that one, that's a really good, like I said, an adaptogen. It helps to balance body chemistry and your hormones. And I did maca in my smoothies for years, and sometimes I'll still throw it in. But I'm kind of an energetic, I do a lot of muscle testing. I just use applied kinesiology and I just decide, on a daily basis what supplements I need. There's some that are non-negotiable, like the cayenne. I never skip that.
Okay.
So.
What about ashwagandha? That's another one that I've used personally when
Hmm.
I was kind of going through a stressful time. I was taking
Hmm.
some ashwagandha at night,
Hmm.
and I do feel like it made a difference. What's your thoughts on that one?
Yeah, I love ashwagandha. It's also a powerful adaptogen. Think about if someone's hearing the word adaptogen and they wonder, I have people ask me that, well, what is that? So you think about our bodies and the chemicals and the hormones. I mean, we are hormone based. All our hormones being in balance is really important. And as women, we go through when we're younger, we go through a hormonal change, big fluctuations every single month. But the layer on top of this for every person is that we live in a place where stress is just a constant, and we're so used to modern stress that we don't even realize that we are having a stressful day just because we're used to it. Crazy traffic and busy schedules and the people and the news and everything is just layers, just a normal amount of stress. So what adaptogens do is they come in and they help you balance your body chemistry so that your body can go, oh, I'm not running for my life. And I'm really simply just having modern stress, and it can help. Adaptogens are some of my favorite friends. These probably last, especially 5 years. I think that this is and then 10 years ago, my mom passed away. So that was extremely stressful. And this is when I was really grateful for things like ashwagandha, maca, rhodiola, things that are adaptogenic that can help me adapt to stress. So
Mhm.
yes, I love ashwagandha.
Okay. Let me ask you about some sexual health because I get asked this a lot because I do a lot of that and a lot of hormone replacement. But sometimes, especially in younger men who maybe have lower testosterone, but they're really kind of too young to get started on testosterone replacement therapy. And I get asked this a lot, and I've heard some things about tribulus and things like that. But
Mhm.
talk maybe about some that can improve maybe hormone health in both men and women.
And my favorite for this is a plant called suma root. And suma is a plant that grows in Brazil, and it's favored in the rainforest, and it's the root. So some of these roots think about maca root, ashwagandha root. These roots are real grounding in the fact of what they do, especially in the adaptogen. But why I love suma for hormonal health, and I've personally used this one extensively because of what it does for not just testosterone, but estrogen and progesterone. And I think its strength is in its testosterone, and then estrogen is second. But what Suma Root does is it goes in and it basically looks at the best way to say is it'll go in and look at what's your say. Let's take testosterone, and as women we all have testosterone too. At least we need it in certain levels. But what Suma will do is you take Suma Root, and I have personal experience with this, especially when I was in the gym and needing testosterone for my workouts. Um, Suma goes in and basically, if you have low testosterone, say as a woman, it will bring it up. Now, as a man, the same. So if they don't want to go on, say, testosterone, injections or whatever. Suma root will bring it up. Now, if someone has their testosterone is too high, or their estrogen is too high, I've actually had sisters mostly, where they will bring it down into more normal levels. So I would say do some research on Suma. That's my favorite for hormones, especially when we're looking at sexual health for both men and women. But you can use some of the other ones too. But to me, that's the most powerful.
Uh, so could that be used to, again, I do a lot of hormone replacement therapy. And so
Yeah,
obviously in men, we watch the estrogen level to make sure that
yeah,
they're not aromatizing and getting too high. And
yeah,
sometimes I don't like putting them on the prescription medication that lowers it because it's just
yeah.
almost too strong. And then sometimes I'll put people on DIM. But is that something that could help in that case if they're on, like, say, TRT to maybe naturally lower that estrogen?
In my opinion, yes. And
Okay.
I would just monitor their levels closely. Just keep the
Hmm.
blood panel, you know, I would just monitor that for each person. But yes, from my
Interesting.
experience.
Okay.
Mhm.
Now, is that a powder form or how does that come?
You can get it in powder, and you can also get it in a tincture.
Hmm. Okay. Interesting.
But it's a Suma. easy. It's easy to research and easy to, well, I don't know how easy it is to get. I mean, we actually do a suma tincture,
Mm-hmm.
um, but yeah,
Okay.
it's really good. It's a
Yeah.
really good plant to know about if you love adaptogens. It's always interesting to me how some of these adaptogens are have some people have ne'ver heard of them,
Mm-hmm.
you know.
Yeah,
But I guess that
I'm
happens
not
with
familiar with that one. So.
yeah. Well, it's almost just like like this lomatium. A lot of people have never heard of lomatium. And there's another plant in Africa that only grows in Africa called cryptolepis that has a lot of antimicrobial properties as lomatium does, but it only grows there. And I've done work for about 15 years with cryptolepis, and it's been so fun to watch. It was initially brought out, and well, the Africans have used it for malaria for centuries. And and now it's been shown to have really good results for people with Lyme and chronic infections, even long haul, some of these long haul symptoms that people have been experiencing in the last few years. So yeah, cool stuff. Cool
Hmm.
stuff and plants, hundreds and hundreds of plants to look
Hmm.
at and study and just be like, ah,
Um, Let me ask you about sleep because that's probably well that may be the most common one that I get asked. Either that
yeah,
you
yeah,
know, about maybe hormonally. You know, there's just a lot of people that you know aren't don't sleep well and that they you know they're hesitant to take a prescription medications, and sometimes I'm
yeah,
hesitant to prescribe a prescription medication, and so I get
yeah,
asked a lot about you know kind of natural sleep remedies. I mean, I'm familiar with a few like valerian root and things like that, but
yeah.
so talk about what you like specifically for sleep.
Yeah, so valerian, that is probably at the top. I love valerian, but what I like to do is blend it with another herb that's also good for calming the sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system. Along with the valerian is a plant called blue vervain, and that those together make it really good for insomnia. But then this is also where adaptogens come in, and this is also where CBD comes in. And you could even do CBD without the THC and get really good results for people who are looking for sleeping. But the reason adaptogens are good for besides things like valerian, you put an adaptogen in, and it can help calm those, bring your body into homeostasis so that you can get sleep. But then I also love things like skullcap because skullcap can help quiet a monkey brain because a lot of people have sleeping issues because they can't shut their brain off and there's lifestyle things they should do. They shouldn't be watching TV or
Sure.
scrolling
Yeah.
their
Yeah.
social media right before they go to bed. They should be doing some practices that help put their body into a state where when they actually get into bed, they can shut their brain. They shouldn't have their phone next to their bed. Like that's terrible for sleep. And a lot of people you talk to with sleep issues, these are the number one things that they have going on. So if you can get these lifestyle factors mostly out, but you also need to have your room cool. You need to have your room dark. It has to be completely dark so that no light comes in. Get a sleeping mask if you have to, and get your TV out of your room. So then if you still have problems sleeping, once you get your environment in a good place, then bring in the adaptogens, bring in the things like skullcap and valerian and vervain. These are the things that are going to actually then go into your biology and help your biology get into a really good place where they're non-addictive. You're not going to feel groggy or sleepy when you wake up with things like Ambien or whatever. So,
Okay. Another one I get asked about a lot is kids with ADHD.
mhm.
I get asked if are there, you know, maybe natural things that can help, and before you answer that, I'll go back to the foundational things. You know, there was a study done that looking at kids with ADHD, and they found that when they put them on a whole food diet,
Mhm.
and you know quit eating the junk food, that it was, I don't remember
Yeah.
the exact numbers, but it was like 75%
Yeah.
of the kids with ADHD it went away.
Yeah.
And so again, you got to do the foundational things, but
Yeah.
outside of that, do you have any success with certain herbs as it pertains to like ADHD?
Yeah. So here's an interesting story. So about 12 years ago, I started thinking this was a little bit longer than that, actually. It was right before I turned 50. I was like, all right, I need to start doing something for my brain. I'd already had the cayenne going for my heart. And I just thought, I watched, my husband's parents have some dementia, and I see so many older people, and I just thought, you know what, I need to formulate something for myself to take for my brain. So I started doing a lot of research, and I researched. I ended up with a notebook full of about 48 plants that all had some effect on the brain for all the things: circulation, oxygenation, nerve health, and all of the stuff. And I ended up boiling it down to about 8 herbs. And then I just started making myself a little tincture of it. And then I started sharing it with all my siblings. And then it was like, then my siblings wanted their friend to have some. And so I ended up bringing it out into a product in a capsule. At the beginning, there's 8 herbs in it, which are ginkgo, um, ashwagandha, gotakola, schizandra berry, skullcap, water hyssop, which is bacopa, and there's one or two more I don't have off the top of my head. Anyway, what happened is I had a friend, right after I brought this out, I had a friend whose 3-year-old son had ADHD. And he said, hey, can I give this to my 3-year-old? And so all the herbs were safe for kids. So he would break open the capsule and put a little bit into his 3-year-old's applesauce, like a half of a capsule or a third of a capsule. And it completely made it so he didn't have to go on any ADHD meds. And his son is now 13 or 14. And I ended up bringing it out into a tincture because you can control the dose a lot better for kids. So there are the herbs I mentioned, there are herbs out there. You could do them in the single, you could do them, in a combination, but I've seen it over the last decade. I've seen many, many kids with ADD, ADHD. And one of the herbs that actually helps to do that is the skullcap, because skullcap, like I said earlier, helps to calm the monkey brain. Because, like I said, sometimes we just, can't turn our brain off. But the foundation is extremely important, and I think it's tough because kids are exposed to so much crap out there. It's hard. They can't go over to a friend's house, and if you don't want them eating sugar or having things with dyes in them or whatever, it's tough. It's tough.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, let me ask you this. People can get herbs from, online, from Amazon, I'm
Hmm.
sure there are some at Walmart.
Oh, yeah.
Are all herbs created equal?
A big hell no. Okay, so here's the thing. There are a lot of good companies and a lot of good herbal people out there. Here's a couple of tips for people. For the most part, I would never get my herbs in a big box store. There might be one or two good ones here and there, but here's a really good way to vet an herbal company or a place where you want to buy your herbs. And I would say if you want to add herbal medicine into your repertoire of things you have to take care of yourself and your family, you need to spend some time and do some due diligence. So the way we do it is, and any company that you want to look into to purchase their stuff, they should be able to provide this for you. And what this is what's called a COA, which is a certificate of analysis. So what we do is we have raw herbs that come into the manufacturing facility. Say there's a blend that has 8 herbs in it. Each herb is sourced, and we do either wildcrafted or organic. And it's sourced, and before it does anything, while it's still in its raw form, it goes through a really comprehensive lab test. It tests for microbes, heavy metals. It tests for correct species to make sure that because there's different species of different herbs. And then it sits in a quarantine while the test comes back. If anything doesn't, if there's too much heavy metals, if there's too many yeast or mold or whatever is in there, it gets sent back to the vendor. So there has to be a comprehensive test. And I would say there's a lot of companies that are they're doing it right because they know it's important to people. Then what we do is we put it into the blend, and then when it's done in the final product, we put it through the lab test again to test for all of these markers. And then what we end up with every single batch is this certificate of analysis. And if someone calls up our company and they say, hey, I have this product with this batch number on it, can you send me the COA? We send it to them on an email. So anyone that is doing their business the right way, any company, and a lot of companies have to follow pretty strict guidelines anyway. Um, they should be able to provide that for you.
Mhm.
So that to me is, the way you're getting it the purest. And we don't like look at the ingredient, just like reading a food label. If you see things on there that you not only don't recognize, but a really common ingredient in a capsule product is organic rice flour. And that might sound good, but you're just using that as a filler. You
Mhm.
might have, you know, 50% organic rice flour, and then you only need to give the person like 50% of the herbs because the herbs are what is where that's what's expensive is the herbs in there. So if you've got other ingredients besides the actual just what you're looking for, then this would be a reason to question, well, is it worth it for me to, because the organic rice flour is not going to hurt you, but it's not going to benefit you.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Well, I guess that's a good segue to maybe talk more about Barlow Herbal. Talk about
Mhm.
your place and how y'all are different, and I guess can people order directly from you just through the website? Just kind of talk about what you do.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's a really very cool place that I find myself in at this point because for me it's about educating people and I love the idea that people are starting to really realize that they're the ones they should be in charge of their own health. They're the ones that are responsible. And then we can bring our partners in, like our doctors and we can bring these people in to help support us, but we're the ones responsible. And that goes back to your exact point of your foundation. So basically, and this might kind of be a little woo woo. I don't know what your audience is like, but the way we do it is we do have a manufacturer that, it's a place that's close to where we are here in Utah. And I love the people who manufacture. They're very much aligned with my values and the way that I want to bring products out to the world. But we do our own fulfillment. So when we get our products, they come into our warehouse and we take the orders, we process the orders, and then we literally touch every order that comes in. So not only do you get the purity of the herbs, but then you get the intention of love and healing that should come with. I mean, you think about indigenous people or medicine man of any peoples that have walked the earth for centuries, and there was always the deep wisdom and there was intention and love and caring that went into providing these health, what's going to be good for the human body. So I at this point and I love what I get to do. One of my sons, he works for me full time, and he's like, "You're never going to retire, are you?"
Right.
So
Yeah,
yeah,
that's
it's fun
fantastic.
what we get to do.
Okay. So just barlowherbal.com, right? That's where
Yep,
they can
yep,
find everything.
yep,
Okay.
yeah.
All right. Uh, Before we start wrapping up, anything else that you want to say that I didn't ask you about?
No, I think that my biggest thing is people should take that first brave step and start educating themselves and roll back to the beginning. Start using your spices and realizing the powerful medicine that your herbal spices can give you.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Um, well, as we wrap up here, then, I always ask my guest if they could give us one health tip that could make us healthier today. What would you say to that?
I would say follow your intuition with what you put in your mouth or don't put in your mouth.
Okay.
I don't think you really need anyone to guide you to say that Skittles and Doritos are not good for you.
Yeah.
Use your intuition, and your food is your medicine. We all know that what we put in is what we get out.
Yeah.
So
Amen to that. Yeah.
yeah,
Well, very
yeah.
nice. Well, Miss Barlow, appreciate that and appreciate all your expertise on herbs and appreciate everyone listening as always. And again, check out the website, barlowherbal.com, and we will talk to everyone next time.